Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing a set 11 sort of half-point tier list. We've had 2 weeks of the format, and Touch Cards has just come out, and we've been able to sort of read the cards, look over them a little bit. So we'll get straight into it. So I'm going to do it by what's the nation? I'm going to do it by nation. So we're going to start off with United Sanctuary, and the first deck to talk about is MLB. Oldest deck. It's still decent due to just having a consistent 12k and a crit once you get that Blast Blade and Blast Dark into Soul. And that still provides a lot of pressure because even with new PGs you're still getting stuck at 4 damage, which is enough for Limit Break now. So it falls off a little bit now that most decks are getting these PGs, but it's still a good contender. So it's low tier 2. I haven't obviously got all of them in there, but it's tier 2, not quite tier 1, but still like very viable. But the new kid on the block for Royals, Dual Knights, I'd put probably below them. Hey guys, just a comment from post Red Flash. MLB and Dual Knights are probably the other way around, like on further inspection, because at the end of the day, like Dual Knights is probably easier to get off like earlier, and it's just got like with the grade 2s, like Canvas 1 and Cooler grade 1, I think it's got a better board presence in it than MLB. Obviously the Break Ride would help as well. So yeah, just Dual Knights and MLB are probably the other way around. Next up is another like old deck on the block, Tsukiyumi. Tsukiyumi is easily high tier 2. It's not quite in tier 1 this format because of the rise of Seal Dragons, getting rid of grade 2s and shuffling your deck. So obviously they lose their stack. Basically right as they get to it, they lose it. But tournaments, it's still a very good deck. Its only real bad matchup is Seals. Everything else is a case of just waiting and getting to that stack and knowing what's coming when. And obviously that will just make it so it's just up to you. You know exactly what cards are coming up, so it's your game to lose. Then the other Oracle deck being Magus. Where have I put it? Here we go. I think Magus is a decent deck. It does what it wants to do well, but at the end of the day, it still relies on Tom to finish out those games. It's got good draw power in the Break Ride and Stellar Magus, as well as Briolette Magus. Obviously, Briolette draws a card, puts itself on top, which then you can use Stellar Magus to add it back, or Pentagonal Magus to add it back. Guarantees your top card. Very good, but not quite what we'd say. Like, it's not quite tier 2. It does what it wants, but it's just not that powerful. So it's in tier 3. We've got Angels. Generic Angels isn't here because it's kind of not really relevant, but Celestials is very good. Celestials has a very good potential, and we've seen it in tournaments do pretty well. It can use the Camas one. It can use Sariel to shove PGs into the damage and then grab them out with no CLs. Same with any card it needs. It's got multi-attacking with what's commonly put on their heal trigger, the on-hit Camas one, put it in, take something out. And also Zerakiel just gives everything on the field 3k, an extra 3k while you've got 1 in damage, which makes grade 1s potentially hit grade 2s, which can help on those like last couple turns that you're just eking out the advantage. Obviously, like, you can put a card in and call out a Celestial, which you didn't have before. Then next we've got Shadows. So PBO and PBD, we have to remember, like, we're analyzing these decks based on their their own advantages, not the people who play them. So even though Shirayasha has got first place on the ladder with Shadows many times, it doesn't necessarily mean that the deck is busted. It just means that Shirayasha is a very good player. So like based on the cards it got, I'd probably put it at like a high tier 3, probably a higher tier 3 than I originally put it. It does what it wants to do. It gets its crits, it gets retire, but like every deck else does it better and faster. And also with it being the Persona Blast, like it's very specific with its cost for the 10k and a crit. So decks like MLB, Salome, they just get crits easily. So that's why it's at the top of tier 3. This is obviously before Raging Form and Revengers. Obviously, as soon as that comes out, tier 1 easy, but this is set 11. This is the halfway point of set 11. Next up is Ezel, or Golds and Ezel. I think Ezel is still a very good deck for climbing and for tournament. The reason I believe this is because it's just, as soon as you get Limit Break, which, don't forget, self-damages exist, you counterblast 1, fill your field, basically. Counterblast 1, call card, do it again, and again, and again. The Vanguard doesn't need any booster, because it's going to hit, because you'll just be gaining that much power. It's got good options with Blast Blade Spirit and Blast Dark Spirit to retire the Interceptors to make sure you get enough attacks in. Also has the option to play stands and crits to provide that early pressure, because you don't need hand advantage. You don't need to use the cards from hand to call the rear guard. So it's a very good contender. I think it's still really good. It doesn't lose too much to Seals or anything else. It's just a still solid competitive deck. But on the other end of Gold Paladin is Liberators, which I would put in a tier 3, because its superior calling isn't as good as Ezel. A lot of its superior calls are random. They don't check top 4. You just have to pray that the top card gives you a good card. And obviously it's got a good retirement with Blaster Blade Liberator being able to be searched out by Gancelot. But it's quite costly as Canvas 2. But it's a decent contender. It has seen ladder success. It does what it does well, which is why it's in tier 3. Obviously, it's below Shadows and Magus. Magus because Magus has Tom, and Shadows because it has crits and power, which unfortunately Liberators doesn't have quite yet. Moving on from golds though, we have a Genesis, which at the moment is probably going to look like Fortuna, but we'll still see a couple Artemis around here and there. I've put this at a tier 2, actually, just below Celestials, because when we think about it, Genesis has good multi-attacking. With its new soul charging cards with grapes and oranges, it has a good source of deck thinning, as those only soul charge non-triggers. And then Fortuna obviously can drive check, I think maximum maybe 5 cards, but at minimum it's usually 3. So you're gonna get triggers, you're gonna get multi-attacks, and they're gonna be big enough to hit the Vanguard. So I think Genesis is a sleeper deck that just not many people are trying out. But fortunately it does run the risk of decking out if you play draws, which is why you probably maybe not. I haven't had a chance to test it out myself, but I think it's definitely a contender. I think it's definitely, on paper at least, it seems like a good deck. But moving on to the Dragon Empire now. I'm going to get it out the way. Eradicators. Tier 1. Best deck the game has seen. It's got everything a deck needs. It's got Incept Ignoring. It's got Easy Retirement. It's got a Restanding Vanguard. It's got Inherent Crit Gain. It's got everything a deck needs to be good in this game. So it's going to stay in tier 1 until the game dies, most likely. I haven't listed other Narukami decks, but they're all inherently tier 2, just thanks to the card pool that it has. But yeah, moving on to the less popular Dragon Empire, Steel Dragons. Now I'd put Steel Dragons at a high tier 2, because well, they've got retirement. It may replace the grade 2, but with Hellfire Blockade, Hellfire Steel Dragon, Blockade Inferno, you just cast 2 and get rid of them. The draw power is nice if they have 3 grade 2s, or if they've got 2 Incepts and you've retired a back row and called a grade 2. But just being able to turn off Incepts with Blockade, or retire them with Blockade Inferno for a relatively cheap cost when you think about it, you just be able to put 3 attacks into Vanguard and finish off the game. Kagero, the deck which I'm trying to coin the term 4Ds, Dauntless Drive, Dragon, Dote. Now, this is one of those decks which I would consider a combo deck. It's about half, because it's not quite a combo deck, because obviously it only needs Dote and some other Dotes in hand, but it's one big push in one turn. And that's a good push, because if you've got 2 grade 2s, usually, so you can attack rear guards, or you can attack rear guards with Dote, to then stand with Dote's effect and draw more cards, drive more triggers. You've also got Dauntless Drive Dragon, which is another Calus 1 restand. So if theoretically you've got 5 face-up damage, that's potentially 4 Vanguard attacks, which is a total of 8 drive checks, 8 cards draw. I mean, you won't get all of them, right? You'll most likely see 1 Dote restand, 1 Dauntless restand for 3 attacks, which is still 6 drive checks, which you're going to have PGs or be on low damage to survive that. Because it's all +10, and the power's usually going in the Vanguard as well. So it's a decent deck, but obviously relies a little bit on getting the Dauntless, but obviously Dote is a strong card in itself. So even if you miss the Dauntless, getting the Dote still provides a good pressure. Plus, you've got that backup grade 3 of Blockade to get rid of the grade 2s. Then the last, we've got 2 Dragon Empire left, which are both clan events. We've got Murakumo, which has been released recently, last month. It's got a good offense. It's got good early rush with its Break Ride Chain skills, which honestly will win you the game a lot of the time. Just like that quick push that then those cards then bounce hand to be using it again, mean that like if they don't get defensive, they're very likely just going to die. So because of the early rush mainly, I've put this in mid tier 2. Oh no, that's Lukiate. So probably a little bit better than MLB because of that early rush again, but below like the other decks, because as soon as you're on grade 3, after that first grade 3 turn, you slowly die off. You've got not much in terms of defense, not much draw power, not much anything. The deck lives and dies by its early rush, but the early rush is so good it gets to mid tier 2 for me. Then the last one, which is just released, Ancient Dragons. I'm not going to list normal Tochikaze, but Ancient Dragons does what it wants to do well. It has good multi-attacking with retiring Baby Rex and summoning out a Tyrannal Legend. Crit gain from the Break Ride, draw power from the Break Ride. The Break Ride is really good. Multi-Vanguard attacks with Dark Rex. You know, you can ride Tyrannal Legend, do the Tyrannal Legend stuff, then Break Ride. Then when your Vanguard doesn't hit, because PGs exist, you can ride again with Dark Rex, get some more attacks and multi-attacking. It's really good. I'm gonna put we haven't seen much of it, so it's sort of below. For me, it's between tier 2 and tier 3. I think I've put it in the top of tier 3 at the moment because we haven't had much chance to see it in action in global. But I'm sure like by the time the next tier list comes around, it'll probably go up a little. Then we're going to move on to Stargate, where we have Novas, which is probably the bottom of tier 1. So this is literally the epitome, the definition of a combo deck, right? It is the be-all end-all of a combo deck. It's got pieces you need to hold until your combo turn. It's very big and explosive, and it will usually kill you in that one turn. It can easily take you from free to death. This is Blau Ethics as well. Easily takes you from free to death, which, as we've seen from multiple tournaments, people usually are holding each other at that free damage point. The second one, which is Dimensional Robo, not Dimensional, well, technically Dimensional Robo, because who plays Zeal or Enigman, but Dimension Police is at a low tier 3. It's got a good piece in its Superior Ride, being able to just ride either Dayusha or Great Dayusha from deck, but unfortunately, like, that and the crit gain doesn't quite get it there. Original Dayusha is a little bit too situational, and Great Dayusha is limit break locked, so it's slower than MLB, and the cards around Great Dayusha just aren't good enough to stand up to like the other decks, like Liberator's Retirement, Hexagonal Magus' Tom. It's just got Tom. I mean, Tom carries any Oracle deck to greater heights. So this is why it's at the bottom of tier 3. Then moving on to the ocean, Magalantia. We've got Bermuda Triangle. We only have one deck here because we only need to talk about one, but Pacifica. I've put Pacifica again at like a low tier 2, high tier 3, because I think like its multi-attacking is actually quite good. You can call 3 columns, so you got your left, the right, and the Vanguard. You can swing at their intercepts, swing at Vanguard. Presuming this is obviously a Break Ride turn. Eternal Idol, bounce the 2 front row, and then call out 2 intercepts from deck, which is always good. Having guaranteed intercepts is good. And then obviously like Celtic and Clear can both power up those cards to make sure that they hit the Vanguard. Obviously, like, you can also sort of do like a little bit, not much of a loop, but you can do a loop with the Eternal Idol Pacifica's skill of putting specifically from the rear guard into soul to add it back to hand. I've seen Alk being played with this. It'd definitely be interesting to see when people actually start playing it, but the multi-attacking is one aspect of Zero where if you can multi-attack well, you're probably going to be pretty good. Then moving on to Aquaforce, which is obviously like the next big clan. Transcore Glory, which is the deck I have here, but also like generic Maelstrom, is a very good tier 2 deck. It's not quite tier 1 because it doesn't win in one turn. If the opponent has a big hand, the break ride turn is not going to do much. But if they have a low hand, it's probably going to hit them, kill them for free. But that's where it comes into it, is that your early push needs to be good enough to get them to high damage, to make them call out cards, to push back, to make it against your cards, and then you can get rid of free cards from the hand with the Transcore and the Glory effect. But obviously there's nothing stopping them just having the cards. They can just save the grade 3, save 2 grade 3s, but again, in the current meta where we are in break rides, you can potentially just snipe out that grade 3 from their hand, so they don't get to break ride. The disadvantage of it is that you need to be at 5 damage, right? So that's why the deck still plays self damages. Unlike when you had Maelstrom, where you could ride it while you're on 4, you have to break ride on 4 and self damage yourself to 5 normally. Otherwise, you can just get damage denied at 4. So definitely a good contender, and we need to see some more tournament play. But I think at the moment, generic Maelstrom is definitely better than Glory Transcore, because it's just more consistent, better card draw, better filtering with Cynthia. But as time goes past, I'm sure people will play it more, and I'll be proved wrong, or I'll be proved right. Then we've got the last clan of Magalancia, the bane of Vanguard Zero, Grand Blue. It's garbage. There's not, like, it just falls flat. It doesn't do what it wants to do correctly. Like, Night Mist is a great card, Guaranteed Intercepts is great. However, because it's counter +1 and the deck has no really good countercharge options, it means that realistically it just doesn't get there. It has no solid win conditions, got no solid finisher. It doesn't really have like a game plan how it's going to finish the game. It just kind of lives, and that's it. And living is cool and all, but if you can't kill your opponent, you're going to eventually die. So hopefully we see maybe a little bit of an increase with the reverse. I think what this deck needs to get better is maybe some retirement or just a more solid game plan, really. But then moving on to Dark Zone, we've got Pale Moon, the deck that I believe is carried by a single card. To be honest, I've put this in tier 2 purely on this. So it's not purely on Genie Fortress, right? Genie Fortress is an amazing card that, unless you're playing Nerukami or you've ridden Blockade, is probably going to win you the game, because putting 4 attacks into a Lukier is really good. Into a Genie Fortress is really good for you. You know, you don't have to worry about Vanguard attacks, and then Lukier's effect of calling out 1 of each grade helps you fill your field. Combine that with the starter, which checks tops 10 and puts a specific card into the soul. There's got some good filtering options, but its multi-attacking is very dependent on hits, which means you've got early pressure, but your late pressure kind of falls off as everything kind of fails to start hitting, and obviously that means that Midnight Bunny and Alice don't use their effects. So Junior Fortress is a good card, which lands it at about tier 2, because its use of the soul means that it doesn't have to use hand, which is always good. Then we've got Dark Irregulars, which is cool. They've got some added mechanics in this set, in Zero, with the demon, with the bike, carriage, and chariot, all gaining all on place, putting more copies of themselves into deck to be soul charged, and then when there's 3 or more of that unit in the soul, they all gain a crit on the rear guard, which no other deck has at the moment. No other deck has rear guard criticals, so that's always good. It means that stands are more effective in those decks. But unfortunately, its soul charging is random, which does get fixed with Amon, but that's a couple sets down the line. Because it's random, you could soul charge triggers, and at the end of the day, Vanguard is a game based around triggers. If you don't get any, you're probably going to lose. If you get all of them, you've got a better chance of winning. So due to the random soul charging, it's sort of tier 3. It does what So basically the condition of being tier 3 is, and not tier 4, is that you do what you want to do. Your deck does what it wants to do effectively. And that's what Dark Radios do. It does what it wants to do effectively. Obviously Reggie is a card that can steal games early if they have no PGs, just by having a massive amount of criticals. Then, the final Dark Zone deck, which we don't really need to go into too much, Spike Growers. It's been good since Emperor came out, and with the introduction of Bad End, just gets better. It's another sort of Nova Grappler deck where it can kill you from free, but it doesn't need to be Break Ride. As you've seen on my stream, Dudley Emperor and Dudley Lucifer are good enough in themselves to win games in ranked, win games in tournaments, you know. It's got good early rush with 3 units from Devil Summoner. It's got good late game, like multi-attacking, but with Bracky, Reckless Express, and an Emperor. And Bad End just helps that in a more of a tournament sense, where you don't need to worry about just quick, fast games. You can deny it free until you've got all your pieces. It's just a general really good deck that like has seen success and is proven to be tier 1 worthy. Now going into Zoo, my favourite nation, because it has my favourite deck in it. Grey Nature, decent. Got good draw power with Duckbill and Blackboard Parrot. Good filtering of the Hamsukes, the grade 1s and grade 2s. Vocal Chicken, calling out intercepts after being retired, means that you get some draws, get intercepts, win-win. Polaris has some good multi-attacking, obviously they give power, so it means that they still hit. But that's what lands it in tier 3. Again, it does what it wants to do really well, but it's just lacking that kind of last push. It's just kind of doing the same thing every turn and hoping that something else happens, and just kind of lives. But that's the condition of being in tier 3. Like, a lot of these decks are sort of similar on power level, obviously with the exclusion of the high tier 1 and the high tier 2s. A lot of these decks can compete with each other, but we have to put them somewhere. So then the next one is Neonectar, which is going to be bottom of tier 3. It's barely outside of tier 4, purely because it, as I said, it's doing what it wants to do effectively. Musketeers is a great deck finning deck. If you don't play, like, if you're the only grade 3 Musketeer you play as Cecilia, like, you're only going to be calling grade 1s and 2s. It gets a buff by creating Cecilias instead of calling them from decks, so you're not getting rid of triggers. But it doesn't have a finisher. There's no finisher. Calling Cecilia is cool. Calling 2 Cecilias is cool, but at the end of the day, they're grade 3s. They're not going to do anything for you. And there's no last push. It's just relying on triggers too much. But it does what it wants to do effectively, which is why it's in bottom of tier 3. Now, Meg Conley. I genuinely forgot about this clan. I put all my clans, all the decks in tiers on a notepad, had them all done. I was like, cool. Now to write my notes. And I was like, hold on. I looked at it. I was like, something's missing. Oh yeah, Mega Colony. So Mega Colony came out just before Break Ride started, which was very bad for it because it's just not good. So its main mechanic is Paralyze, which rests a unit and keeps it rested, and you can't move it, which means you have to call over it to get rid of it and make it useful, which is like an inherent neg. However, paralyzing is expensive. It also is useless on grade 2s because you're just going to retire the grade 2s anyway, or like attack into them. So you're only really like paralyzing grade 1s or stuff like Basils and Diamantes against Aquaforce. But beyond that, obviously, like, you're putting out Dumb Incept. They don't need the boosters most of the time, so that's why it's going to be above Grand Blue because it can do things, but like it's not very good. And that is why it's in the top of tier 4. So this is what it looks like midway through set 11. This is what I'd put the decks at. Feel free to comment down below if you think I've put a deck too low or think I've put a deck too high. Feel free to, tell me. Most of these decks I haven't been able to play myself because I just don't have the cards, or I've not been playing Zero long enough. But at the end of the day, if you can change my mind, feel free to. But I hope everyone has enjoyed this video, and obviously, like, feel free to follow my Twitch, watch me play some of these decks online with ranked, and when set 12 comes out, big pack opening. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.